That will be $1.08.
It's getting on my nerves, man. Forget it.
Just give him the fucking Danish. Fuck this.
How you doing tonight? Tell me. You sure? Hey, man. Here you are.
The movie kicks off in a late-night convenience store in L.A., where Nick, a small-time drug dealer, is agonizing over which coffee flavor to pick. His old flame, Dallas, and a hitman buddy, Billy Hill, are getting impatient with his indecisiveness. Eventually, Nick settles on chocolate macadamia, but bad luck, the dispenser is empty. Frustrated, he complains to the cashier, who tells him to pick another one. Begrudgingly, he grabs a hazelnut and moves to the register, where he demands a free pastry. The cashier, unfazed, points out that freebies only come with a 20-ounce coffee.
The price of a large fountain drink.
That's bullshit.
That's the last straw for Dallas, who pulls out a gun and shoots the guy on the spot.
This.
Things go south quickly when a cop strolls in for some coffee. Thinking fast, Nick poses as the cashier, while Dallas and Billy pretend to be customers. At first, everything seems fine, but then the officer notices blood on the floor.
Fine.
Realizing the jig is up, they kill him too. The scene shifts to Texas, where we meet Casey, Nick's old partner in crime who left the drug world behind. Now he's married to Christine, has a legit job as an architect, and is in the process of adopting a child. One Thursday morning, he gets an unexpected call from Nick, who asks if he can crash at his place for a few days. Casey isn't thrilled about the idea, but when Nick mentions he's getting married, he hesitantly agrees.
I'm coming through Houston tomorrow morning.
Over breakfast, he tells Christine about Nick's visit. She's confused. She's never even heard of Nick, but she has to rush off to work before she can ask too many questions.
I planned dinner with Alan.
Before leaving, she reminds Casey about their meeting with Dr. Jarvis from the adoption agency. Later that evening, right on schedule, Nick shows up, the two old friends catch up, and Casey fills him in on his new, boring but stable life.
Hands on that wall.
Nick, on the other hand, still seems to be up to his old tricks. Before long, he asks to borrow Casey's car, saying his own has a flat tire. Without thinking much about it, Casey tosses him the keys. Left alone, Casey tries to focus on work, but keeps getting distracted. Passing by the guest room, he notices one of Nick's bags, looking suspiciously familiar from their old drug-dealing days. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he unzips the bag, only to find it stuffed with heroin. Furious, he calls Nick, demanding he get his drugs out of his house immediately.
Hearing me, Nick?
Sorry, Case. Time's up. Gotta go.
Nick, however, is frustratingly calm about it, saying he has some business to finish first. Fed up, Casey chucks the drugs in the trash. Hours later, the doorbell rings.
How much of it I'll buy off you?
No,
Expecting a normal delivery, Casey opens up to a pizza guy, who immediately pulls a gun on him. Turns out, this isn't just any pizza guy. It's Ice, a Jamaican hitman sent to retrieve the heroin. Casey admits he trashed it, which doesn't sit well with Ice's boss, who orders him to kill Casey. Thinking fast, Casey suggests they share a joint before anything drastic happens. Ice,
I don't have it.
Ice, being a sucker for good weed, agrees. As they smoke, Ice opens up about his dream of being a rapper and how he only got into crime for the money. They keep smoking for a while, but then Ice suddenly remembers his actual mission, killing Casey. Before he can act, though, his phone rings. It's a friend asking him to spit some bars. Ice reluctantly starts rapping, giving Casey just enough of a distraction to attack. A struggle ensues, but Casey gains the upper hand, ties Ice up with duct tape, and locks him in the garage. Just when Casey thinks he can breathe, the doorbell rings again. This time, it's Dr. Jarvis from the adoption agency. Panicked and still a bit high, Casey scrambles to clean up the mess and air out the room before letting the doctor in. Dr. Jarvis starts asking questions, trying to get a feel for Casey's suitability as a father.
Okay, now you understand, of course,
Things are going okay until the doctor asks about his past life in L.A., a topic Casey would rather avoid. Before the interview can get too deep, there's another interruption. Dallas shows up at the door.
That was just the initial consultation. This is the individual.
She's looking for money that she believes Nick stashed along with the heroin. Casey, trying to keep things under control, tells her Nick isn't around and asks her to leave. But Dallas isn't the type to take no for an answer, and she pushes her way inside. Dr. Jarvis, thinking Dallas is just a friend of Casey's, invites her to join their chat. Without hesitation, Dallas sits down and drops a bombshell. She spills the beans about Casey's past, exposing him as a ruthless drug dealer who didn't hesitate to pull the trigger.
You're not one of those, Freudian
This revelation shakes Dr. Jarvis to the core, and he immediately decides to leave. It's clear Casey's chances of adoption just went down the drain. Casey tries to talk him out of it, but Dr. Jarvis isn't having any of it and walks out. As soon as Dr. Jarvis is out the door, Dallas pulls out a gun, ties Casey to a chair, and demands to know where Nick's stash of cash is.
Are you on?
Casey insists he doesn't have a clue, reminding her that he left his criminal past behind a long time ago. At this point, we get a flashback that reveals why Casey walked away from that life. One deal went south, bullets started flying, and in the chaos, Casey accidentally shot and killed a pregnant woman. That moment haunted him ever since, making him swear off the drug world for good. Dallas doesn't care about his sob story. She decides she'll just wait for Nick to return, and, in the meantime, she makes a move on Casey.
Let's go.
He's disgusted and refuses, reminding her he's married, but she couldn't care less. Just as things are about to get worse, Billy bursts in and shoots Dallas, splattering Casey with blood. Billy's here for the same reason. He wants the money. He reveals that Nick stole $2 million from the cops and is convinced Casey knows where it is. To make Casey talk, Billy gets ready to torture him, pulling out a blowtorch and a saw. But before he can start, they hear police sirens.
You know, in a way, it's really Nick that's to blame.
Billy quickly hides his tools and steps away to check things out. Meanwhile, Casey seizes the moment, frees himself, and grabs a frying pan, but sits back down, pretending he's still tied up. Billy comes back, relieved that the cops were just dealing with something next door. But just as he's about to resume his twisted interrogation, he notices the duct tape on the floor. Too late. Casey swings the frying pan and knocks Billy out cold. Instead of killing him, Casey ties him up and throws him in the garage next to ice, hanging both of them upside down like trophies. Then, Nick calls Casey from payphone. He apologizes for all the mess he's caused and confesses that he did steal both the heroin and the money. There's something off about his tone, like he knows his time's up. Casey asks him where he is, but Nick just tells him he's leaving the country and says goodbye. Turns out, Nick is actually bleeding out from a gunshot wound, barely hanging on. Casey cleans up the blood-soaked mess in his house. But things take another dark turn when Kazarov, a corrupt cop, shows up. He tosses a bag onto the floor, and Casey's stomach drops. It's Nick's severed head. Kazarov wants the money too and gives Casey a deadline. Find it by 7 p.m., or he'll pin all the chaos of the day on him. To make sure Casey understands how serious he is, Kazarov walks into the garage and shoots the captives, then casually tells Casey to get rid of the bodies since it's garbage day. Left with no choice, Casey chops up the bodies and stuffs them in the trash. As he's finishing up, he notices Nick's car outside and remembers something about a flat tire. He checks the spare and, sure enough, finds the money stashed inside. Along with it, there's a small box containing watches, gifts from Nick for Casey and Christine. Casey quickly comes up with a plan. Using Ice's phone, he tricks Ice's gang into thinking there's a heroin auction happening at his house at 7 p.m., setting them up for a showdown with Kazarov's men. With chaos about to erupt, Casey takes Dallas's Lamborghini and rushes to find Christine. Right on schedule, the gangsters and the dirty cops start shooting up Casey's house, completely unaware they've all been played. Meanwhile, Casey tracks down Christine at the airport and tells her everything. Well, almost everything. He tells her they need to leave the country and asks her to come with him. At first, she's hesitant, torn between her career and her love for him. But just as Casey turns to walk away, she makes her choice. She grabs his hand and tells him she's coming, but he better explain everything on the way. And that's how it all wraps up. If you liked this breakdown, give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. But honestly, you should check out the movie yourself. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more recaps.